Good day, mates. I'm actually here in Australia, so I'm coming back to Los Angeles today, but I wanted to give everyone a Southern California housing market update, especially for our first-time buyers out there, because I think a lot of things are shifting underneath the surface of this market. And one of the themes that I'm starting to see, and is especially interesting when you're not in the United States, you're reading about these sort of national housing headlines. And I want to caution people against doing that. Real estate is and has always been a very, very local market. And so, really, if you're trying to make decisions of what's working for you, the reality is, while there are some national trends that do make a difference, right? Interest rates, things like that. The reality is that the local market conditions really have a much bigger effect on what your market is doing, especially in the market segment you are talking about. Those laws of supply and demand are subject to a lot of inputs that are really locally based and not based on a national level. So let's go ahead and get started this week, right before Thanksgiving. One of my favorite times for first-time home buyers actually is between Thanksgiving and New Year's or so. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why that is and kind of what special conditions we have going this year. So let's get started. My name is Stephen Meade with Domicile Real Estate, where we are on a mission to help California's renters become homeowners. And this week we've got really kind of an interesting market. And I think around this time of year, what I like to do is I think a lot of the things happening now will set the tone for the beginning of next year. So this is one of those rare moments where we do start to get a glimpse into what do we think that future first quarter 2026 market is going to look like. So let's go ahead and jump right into the statistics here. So we're looking at our closed prices. And again, I want you to bear in mind that this is older data, right? Like these closed numbers are 45 days old. So if we're looking at that, what do we see here? We see kind of our entry-level single-family home, that blue line there. It's been bouncing back and forth kind of between 790 and into the low 800s. That's kind of been really kind of holding steady for most of the year. On our condo side, I think we have something that's pretty interesting happening, which is a significant jump that honestly, this pushes us on par with where we were back in July. That's been a really soft market. I don't know if this is going to hold or if this is just a bunch of people sort of noticing that condos got cheap and soft. So we got a little bit of a bump in that market. And I'm going to go over why I don't think that's going to last here, because we have a lot of things that are really leading indicators, right? Things that are pointing out, what's going to happen in the future. So if we look at our total monthly payment, I think you see these starting to come back together, right? Between that entry-level single-family home, which just as a reminder is that 25th percentile 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, and then our entry-level condo, which is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath attached property. And when you look at these payment numbers, understand this is including mortgage, insurance, property taxes, an HOA fee, and is based on 5% down. If we look at that for that entry-level single-family home, we're just above $6,000 of minimum, $6,000 in the payment, right? And just under $4,500 on that entry-level condo side. If we look at our minimum household income that's required, right? I think this one's always been interesting to me. If you had no other debts, what is the minimal amount of income in that household required to afford these properties, right? And we see, and to qualify, it's $148,000 here on our entry-level single-family home and just under $110,000 on our entry-level condo or attached property. If we look at our absorption rate, right? This is the one that I think is something that really you should pay attention to, because I want you to look at the trend line since the middle of the year. Now, normally in our market, things get, somewhat soft. Now, if you do look, right, like once we enter this time of year, not a lot of people put their homes on the market. That does kind of distort these a little bit, but I want you to look at that trend since July. These absorption rates have been steadily climbing on our single family homes here, right? We were in the 70s and the 60s for a lot of this year, and now we are increasingly in the high 70s and 80s, right? The last 6 weeks, we have been 80% or higher on absorption rate for those entry level single family homes. And now we see what was a very soft condo market. We see some reversal in that number here, right? Like we were even in the 50s, which is a buyer's market for sure for condos. Now that number is starting to go up. So what does that mean? And what do I think this means for the future? Hold that thought, right? Because there's a couple of other ingredients we need to talk a little bit about the future. But what does this tell me when we see these not just jumping up because we're towards the end of the year, but these are steadily increasing absorption rates? This is the one that I think really made me take a step back. And that is if we're looking here, our entry level single family home inventory, which for the past year has always been higher than the number of units of condos we've had, for the first time, those numbers are matched, right? Because that inventory has just been sliding for those entry level single family homes, whereas it's been a much more gradual decline. And in fact, if you look here, right, I mean, we're not far off from what inventory level we were at last year. And if you look at that slope, I mean, that's a very heavy downward slope on these inventories as we head towards the end of the year. This, I think, combined with interest rates that are a little bit lower, might make for a pretty strong first quarter that starts earlier. That spring home buying season might begin sooner this year as opposed to being delayed. Now, if we look at our still active percent, right, like this is a much finer graph that talks about sort of this relative demand, or really what percentage of these homes that are coming on the market are still active after 2 weeks, right? And if you look at this, you see that that condo market has remained reasonably soft, but there has definitely been a lowering of this number in the stat for those single family homes since the middle of this year. And that means that market is tightening. It is getting to be a more competitive market for entry level single family homes. So even if you just think that trend is going to keep continuing, right, what does that mean for the spring? It means spring will be more competitive than it is right now. And typically this is a very, somewhat slow time of year. And in fact, you'll notice versus last year, we've actually got a more competitive market. And in fact, this level of competitiveness is looking a lot like the February, March era of this year for those entry level single family homes. Now, if we look at our relative inventory, right, this is taking that look of really gauging how fast are homes flying off the shelves versus, right, how many homes do we actually have available, right? Like, so instead of just giving us an absolute number of inventory, this tells us how many weeks, if nothing new came on the market, how long would it take for us to exhaust? Now, this number is a little higher than it was at this point last year. But if you look at that graph towards the end of the year, things really turned into I mean, we had some numbers over 10 weeks for those entry level single family homes. And I mean, that's only creeping up slowly. I mean, look at how steady this number has really been. I think that's pretty interesting. And if you look at our condo number, even that's like turned a little bit of a corner barely, or at least stopped going up, right? If you look at this, you can see things kind of jumped up from this, low period at the beginning of the year. We only had, 11, 12 weeks of inventory of condos, and we kind of went up to that sort of like high teens, and we're just kind of treading water around that, right? So if you're looking at this, all of these things to me really are pointing to a pretty strong spring. I know most economists here are not predicting huge double digit increases for 2026. And I'm inclined to agree with them. I do think we are going to see noticeable price increases, though. And what is a noticeable price increase for next year? Well, I mean, honestly, I think we're probably going to see something in that 3 to 6% neighborhood. So it will be more than inflationary, right? So it'll be a real increase in the cost of homes, but it won't be something ridiculous. And my personal belief is that most of that increase will come in the beginning of the year, because I think we're seeing that's when things are going to be the strongest. Overall, we really have a market that in the last year or two has had a much more close alignment to being a balanced market than we've seen in the past. Anyhow, thanks so much for watching. Questions, comments, we love them. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. And then also, obviously, if you or someone you know should be a homeowner here in Southern California, absolutely reach out to us. We'd love to lend you our expertise. and we'll see you again real soon.